Secretary Vilsack, thank you very much for your kind introduction. In a shameless attempt to get your sympathy, the audience sympathy, I'll just tell you that recently I had cataract surgery, and my vision is rather blurred, my depth of field doesn't exist, and I'm a little unsteady on my feet. I have not been drinking, not yet. So my job is to set the stage for this discussion and to give you a little bit of the background about the Laureate's letter. There are more than 700 million people on Earth who face food insecurity. And tragically, there are 60 million children on Earth who are stunted, 60 million children under the age of 5 who are physically and mentally stunted. We are obviously not going to meet the Sustainable Development Goal number 2, which is to eliminate world hunger by 2030. And looking forward, the predominance of evidence indicates that we're not on track to meet food needs or demand in a sustainable or even an unsustainable way by 2050. So simply stated, the agricultural indicators that ought to be sharply positive are in fact not, and most are negative. The 20th century, by and large, was a pretty good century for farming. Not so much anymore. We have hundreds of studies now looking forward on the effect of climate, heat, on crops that show that we'll be experiencing a decline in productivity of our major staple crops by mid-century, which is just 25 years from now. And this is particularly the case in Africa, which is tragic, of course, because that's the most food insecure region. But few of these studies that give us the bad news capture all of the things that are happening in agriculture that could give us a even further decrease in productivity. They don't take account of the possible constraints on water use due to aquifer depletion and melting of the glaciers, and none that I know of take account of soil degradation and loss of soil fertility. In fact, the African Union says that as much as half of the cropland in Africa will be unusable 25 years from now. Obviously, that will have an impact on productivity. And it's not just affecting row crop agriculture, if you will, it's affecting the livestock industry and fisheries. There are many ways of looking at this problem, many reasons to be concerned. Obviously, there's a humanitarian reason, and I hope we all share that. But there's a national security reason for being concerned about this situation, because if we don't feed people, we feed conflict. And we see that happening all around the world. So it was this context that in which we pulled together a meeting in October. It was organized by the State Department. The meeting was held at the Rockefeller Foundation in New York City. And it was a small meeting of Nobel laureates and World Food Prize laureates. It was chaired by Nobel laureate in physics, Brian Schmidt. At that meeting, we discussed and drafted a statement that I suspect you either have in front of you or you can find easily. We had some further meetings, teleconferences, and email exchanges, and we finalized that draft. And then we opened it up for signature by all of the other Nobel and World Food Prize laureates. And as you've heard, we now have 128 Nobel laureates that have endorsed this statement, and I think 26 World Food Prize laureates. So in other words, over 150 endorsements in total. That statement was then launched at a bipartisan event on Capitol Hill in January, where the World Food Prize Foundation came together with the Farm Journal Foundation and the State Department and others to launch that statement. We're here to further elaborate. So today it's my privilege to moderate a panel discussion about these issues. We have a number of very interesting panelists, as you can see on stage, and I'll give them the shortest of introductions now. Dr. Martin Chalfie is a university professor at the Department of Biological Sciences at Columbia University. He's the 2008 Nobel Prize laureate in chemistry for the discovery of green fluorescent protein, GFP. He is the past president of the Society of Developmental Biology and of the American Society for Cell Biology, and he chairs the Committee on Human Rights of the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. Dr. Gebisa Ejeta is the Distinguished Professor of Agronomy at Purdue University. He is the 2009 World Food Prize laureate for his work on sorghum hybrids, which have really saved many millions of lives in Africa, and he also received in 2023 the National Medal of Science at the White House. Dr. John Mather is the senior astrophysicist at NASA, very involved with the Hubble Space Telescope and the lead scientist for the James Webb Space Telescope. He received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2006 for his work on cosmic background radiation, the result yielding evidence of the continuing expansion of the universe since the Big Bang. And I'll just mention here that you can go online and see part of his work, a picture, if you will, literally, of the universe, a baby picture of the universe when it was only 400,000 years old. I invite you to look that up. Dr. Cynthia Rosenzweig is the 2022 World Food Prize laureate and the senior research scientist at the Center for Climate Systems Research at Columbia University. She is also the founder of the Agricultural Model Intercomparison and Improvement Project. And you will be relieved to know that it goes by its acronym, AgMIP.
Yes.
So with that, I think we will start and have a little bit of a discussion. And I will move to the chair, if you don't mind. Thanks. So my first question is really to both Marty and to John. Why would society want to invest in such basic moonshot aspirational research when we've got so many problems here on Earth today, right now? Is this a good investment?
I don't think we'd be here if it wasn't a good investment. So that's the easy answer to it. But I come from a background of basic research, not applied research. And what I see generally, whether it's people that are interested in diseases because either they or their loved one has it or someone they know, the first idea is always, can we find a cure? Can we find an answer? But then, with some reflection, there's the idea of we don't know enough basic information to have new approaches, to have new ways of looking at things. And that's essential. And so eventually people start to think more generally about how to do it. But when you have that basic information in the background, it also means that there is a spillover into all sorts of new directions. Let's just take one example, the laser. When Charles Towns developed the maser, he wasn't thinking about being able to help grocery store owners get people through the checkout line faster, or
my cataracts.
or laser surgery, or CDs or DVDs, if anyone remembers what those are. All of those things come afterwards, but they were not the goal of it. But also low energy physics, laser tweezers, gravitational waves, all came from being able to have the laser. So the basic research gave rise to new applications, new approaches to things, and new ways of thinking about other fundamental discoveries. So my answer to the question is, of course it's worthwhile not only for the end goals, but for all the other things we're going to learn and be able to apply. And we absolutely need new ways, new knowledge to apply to these problems. Because if our old knowledge worked, I think we would have used it already. So we need to have that new knowledge.
Good way to put it. John?
Well said. So I've been thinking about this since before I was born. Because my dad was working on agricultural research at that time. So in 1946, studying dairy cows to get more and better milk. So I grew up on a research farm of Rutgers University. And the objective was to get more and better milk. So, by the way, agriculture propelled one important discovery, the development of statistical analysis. So I learned analysis of variance from my dad. So, as I had a rat experiment in 9th grade. And what do you feed them to get more and better rats? No, not exactly. I grew up with a faith that we need to know more about food and how to get more and better food. So all of my neighbors were farmers, and they were working like really hard. And you get up early, you milk the cows at 4 o'clock in the morning, you go to school, you come home and you do some more of it. So pretty clearly, agricultural technology was essential to the well-being of my entire community. And you could see it grow. So how come was I there? Why was my dad doing that? He was born in southern Africa. And they got magazines from America showing how fat and happy the cows were. And you look at the cows in southern Africa, and they weren't not fat and happy. So what's the difference? So how about getting research on this topic? So that's how I got started in this. And you never know what's going to happen next. Here I am, a physicist studying the Big Bang.
Your point.
So, John, if I heard you correctly, if you had only retained your interest in cows, we might not be here today. You might have solved the problem in that way.
It would have been a different problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've mentioned before that you had some surprises working on the Hubble Space Telescope, and perhaps expected to see some things and discover some things with the Hubble that you didn't, which led you in another direction. Can you just quickly tell about that?
Modify the story a little bit. I got into the cosmic background business because my thesis project was about that. In Berkeley, my thesis advisor said, well, we're going to build this instrument to measure the Big Bang. Yeah, okay. We built it. I was a graduate student, and we launched it. It was a balloon payload, went 25 miles up, and honestly, it did not work when it got there. So we got it back, and my fellow graduate students fixed it, and I got to write a thesis about something that didn't work, and went on to get a job at NASA, which was prearranged, by the way, before the failure. And so I went up and got a job at the Goddard Institute in New York, where Cynthia is today. And then NASA said, well, we want proposals for new satellite missions. We've just about finished the moon program. What are we going to do next? My thesis project failed. We should try it in outer space. And that became the Cosmic Background Explorer satellite, which measured the early universe. We shouldn't call it the Big Bang, by the way. That's a whole other topic. But, anyway, so disappointments leading to successes is sort of the history of my life. And I think that's probably true of almost everybody.
Thank you. Gebisa, my friend, just to hone in and get down to the local level, so to speak, tell us about your experience and why agricultural R&D, including that's aimed towards strengthening global food security abroad. Why is that, or why should it be important to the United States?
Thank you. Let me premise my comments with a couple of statements about the state of the world. Our planet is endowed with a lot of natural resources, although land and water, the critical resources, are dwindling as a result of abuse, misuse, and so on. But we live in an interconnected but yet uneven world. And if you look at the natural resources that feed humanity, all of the plant resources, as you would know, Cary, that fed humanity came from the old world. On the other hand, all of the knowledge that have been generated, and I may add, as a result of incredible leadership by the US government in terms of establishing the value of science and the value of science in agriculture to humanity in its own country and making that available for the rest of the country, for the rest of the world, then we have become a truly interdependent world. And so much of what we've done is follow the path of using science to advance technologies and innovations and products that feed humanity. And in terms of how I got here and why I value that as an important agenda, as the opportunity that I received in getting an education came from an old, forgotten US government legislation, the old Point 4 program that President Truman and the rest of the world coming after the end of the Second World War, and the world coming from a series of wars that have really taken a lot of lives around the world, realizing that humanity may need a way to govern itself and how to organize itself, and made commitments during that, and the US had that leadership. And so President Truman in 1949, in his inaugural address, he made 4 points, reinforcing this need of the world working together. And the first statement was about unending support to the United Nations, because the world believed we need a multilateral organization for us to have peace around the world, to live together. And then he talked about the freedom-loving countries of the world, and he's talking about building the Atlantic Alliance at the time. And the third was rebuilding Europe again, and this is a Marshall Plan that had already been declared. The fourth point is, he said, we need to share our scientific advances and the industrial progress we had made with poor developing countries around the world. And the reason, he said, was when these people learn how to build their capacities to take care of themselves, they would feed themselves and they would build their industries, and then they would become allies with us, both in economy and in politics. And so I say that was what an enlightened self-interest was, the vision of the Point 4 program. As many of you would know, thanks to the power and the wisdom that is really built in the US legislation, that through working with governments, then in those years, Point 4 was really the agency that the United States had around the world to work with poor developing countries. They had US embassies, but there were no activity other than technical assistance or in trade and so on. Point 4 was the program that really for about 10 years that ran the US global agenda until President Kennedy came in 1961. He established the USAID to take care of the work that the Point 4 program was doing for the US around the world. So I trace my roots to that because when the Point Four was established, President Truman being from Missouri, he called on his friend who was the president of Oklahoma State University to lead the Point Four program. And so President Henry Bennett then started the program by establishing bilateral relationship with countries. And so he opened up a college of agriculture in Ethiopia through Oklahoma State University. And so in my career, I had seen those and I had lived that life because the high school I went to and the college I went to was built by Oklahoma State University as part of that Point Four program. They came here to build a college, realized that rural kids are not going to college to study agriculture unless you prepare them. So they built a high school to generate the crop of students that would go to college to study agriculture. And then in passing, let me mention also the university I came to learn in the United States and where I work today, Purdue University was sent to Brazil to help strengthen the College of Agriculture, the University of Viçosa in Brazil. So I went to a high school that was built by the Point Four program, went on to the College of Agriculture that the Point Four eventually built, and then came to study at Purdue University. The lesson out of that is this notion about technical assistance that our public really totally misunderstands. It really is not a handout. It is an enlightened self-interest to help other communities, because when those communities help themselves understand democracy and learn about democracy and so on, they become partners with other nations as well. And so I come from a country that had several years, about 120-some years of relationship with the United States. And in October last month, I was sent by the State Department to celebrate the 75th year anniversary of the Point Four program, talked about the enduring legacy of the Point Four program in Ethiopia. With all the things that have gone around Ethiopia, the background in which agriculture and technology in Ethiopia has been built up is by Oklahoma State University opening Jimma Agricultural High School and the College of Agriculture at Alamma. And so you say, yes, Ethiopia is still a growing, developing country, but imagine if we didn't have that. And I went through the story of how that led to establishment of research, similar to what we had done in the United States, the establishment of extension service, and the establishment of development programs that are taking place, all manned by the students that went to those two schools in Ethiopia. And then the example it set in for the rest of African countries. When I went to college in Ethiopia, Alamma College, we also had students coming from several African countries to study at this Oklahoma State University-built college. And so just to setting the tone for what you said, and the notion what the U.S. had given is the best of what it had, because as many of you know, through the land-grant universities, what built the United States and what built agriculture in the country and economic development in the Midwest, in all of the country around, all of the states around the country, was really this incredible wisdom that in 19th century vision that President Abraham Lincoln, the land-grant university and Congress had done. And let me add one other point in terms of really bringing about due credit to the U.S. legislation. I have lived since the mid-century, I have lived through all of the famines that have taken place and the shocks that we had seen. And earlier on, right after independence, when the aura about independence are really waning out, the first set of famine and drought came to Africa, and Ethiopia was really the one that was hugely affected. That's 1974. When that happened, until then, as I said, through the Point programs, through USAID, all those kinds of support programs were going on. But it was established in 1974 then, we realized the Congress realized we need to put our best foot forward, and that is that we need to support programs with the best of what we have. And that best of what we have is we need to bring in partnership with US universities with national programs in developing countries. And so the amendment of the Foreign Assistance Act in 1975 was done by Congress to make sure that US universities partner with US government to provide, to dispense technical assistance program in developing countries. And then in 2008 and 9, when we had the financial food price crisis, again, it was Congress that really sat down and said, we need to adjust, we need to pivot again, and we need to put together programs and food security. And so President Obama, in 2013, then the Congress, both parties, working together, established the food security legislation that really is provided and then renewed in 2016. And I would say that the wisdom that the Congress and legislation had shown, presidents came in and presidents went, and programs leaned one way and programs leaned the other way. But it's the US Congress that sustained that vision of what is good about these programs, because it's not a handout, it's not giving away resources from the US, but really buying alliances and helping develop countries around the world. And today, Brazil, that started that way, is one of the biggest markets in South America with the United States. So I just thought I'd share this as part of my experience in terms of this vision that this country had from the beginning, and it shared the best of what it had with the rest of the world. And I really think it still has a lot to offer to the rest of the world in terms of global leadership.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Cynthia, turning to you, it's said that climate is what we expect and weather is what we get. Maybe it can be the other way around too.
Yeah.
So why is it important to keep researching climate and its impact on agriculture? We have 10-day weather forecasts. Isn't that good enough?
Unfortunately, no. That's a short answer. But first, actually, Cary, I want to thank you for bringing the Nobel laureates and the World Food Prize laureates together. I think it is actually fulfilling a dream of Norman Borlaug, who received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970. And he then went on to found the World Food Prize, because he said there needed to be that, since there wasn't that category in the Nobel Prize. But it's been such a great experience to be part of the two groups coming together. I also want to say that the Nobel Prize recognized the importance of climate change in 2007, when it gave the Nobel Peace Prize to Senator Al Gore, former Vice President Al Gore, but it was shared with the scientists. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it's hundreds of scientists, I was one of those hundreds, who bring forward the research, the knowledge about the changing climate to decision makers around the world. And the key word here, Cary, is change. It's because we used to have the phrase climate normals, which would be, oh yeah, this is our normal climate for 30 years and into the future. And many of the agricultural practices were based on those climate normals. There is no climate normal anymore, because it is a non-stationary process of climate change. You mentioned the effects that many studies, and our group, AgMIP, has done many of them, showing the decrease in productivity under climate change projections. But there's also another key link to nutrition, not only the productivity, but the nutrition with increasing carbon dioxide lowers the nutrient content of the grain as well, so that we have less protein per unit of yield, and also micronutrients, which we need for nutrition security, as Secretary Vilsack brought forward as well. And then just finally on climate change, the extreme events that Gebisa was mentioning are increasing in those extreme climate events, like heat waves, droughts, floods, are increasing in frequency, not only in frequency, but in the intensity and the duration. And what statistically now we can do is see how much of those events, those climate events, are attributed to the change in climate that we are experiencing. And that attribution is increasing. This is why we absolutely, fundamentally need continued and augmented and enhanced research on the climate change conditions, so that when we do basic research, when we apply that basic research, we understand that it won't be in one climate that we've planned it for, right? But that we're going to have to be able to be dynamic and adapt through the coming decades. That's why it's so important.
And I think I would add to that different crops are going to respond differently in different places to those climates.
Yes.
And that needs to be modeled so that we know how to manage that
Absolutely.
situation.
And can I just say, as a follow-on, now we have to talk about solutions, because we can't just have catastrophe and about the climate change. Absolutely. What we need to do together is work on solutions. And with Cary, I will have to now do a shout out to the program that Cary started at the State Department, took all over the world, especially to Africa, but in other places as well, called the Vision for Adapted Crops and Soils, VACS, speaking of acronyms.
Yes.
So what this does is this program turned around. You might have all heard this phrase, orphan crops, right? These were the crops that didn't make it into the big four, right? Wheat, corn, rice, and soybean. That huge focus of research has been on. The orphan crops have now, through the VACS program, become opportunity crops, and has opened the focus of the research beyond cereals to the fruits and vegetables, the roots and tubers, more legumes besides soybeans. All these are still very, very important and will be important as we go forward. But for nutrition, many of these opportunity crops, like fonio, the wonderful small green from West Africa, cowpea, African eggplant, for the taro, these are highly nutritious. But what we need to do is work together with breeders, with modelers, to bring these crops into a more major part of the agriculture in I think all countries of the world, and to the diets of the people, to provide not only the food security, but the nutrition security in a changing climate.
Thanks, Cynthia. I think there's one thing that unites all of us on stage, and it's not just that the word laureate will be in our obituaries.
No.
But I think we've all had the experience of being told that whatever we're proposing to do is not going to work, or that it's impractical, it's going to cost too much money, it's already been tried before, et cetera, et cetera. And John, I turn to you for a second, because I can't imagine that putting the size of the James Webb Space Telescope in orbit was not something where you encountered those same kind of reactions. You're going to do what? You're going to send this huge telescope up into space. It's going to unfold. Did somebody tell you that that's not going to work? And what can you tell us about persistence or stubbornness in the face of that?
Okay, well, a few words. Number one, it was done because there was no other way to get the science. So whatever it takes to learn that information, you have to figure it out. And then it turned out to be this enormous telescope that takes you almost forever, but not quite, and leads to almost cancellation, but not quite. So, however, there was a faith at the very beginning that we knew our team could do this project. That we knew we had people, we knew we had ideas, we knew we had a pathway where we could solve all of the problems that we knew that we had. So we didn't know how long it was going to take to do that, but we just set out, and we had the blessing of what we call a decadal survey. And every 10 years, the NASA and the Department and DOE and NSF combined forces to sponsor a report from the National Academy of Sciences. And they report back to, this is what we think is the coolest thing to do next. And they said, well, this new thing, which wasn't yet called the James Webb Space Telescope, was their top priority. Okay, they didn't know how much it would cost, and none of us did, although back in those days, people thought it could be done for a lot less money than it actually took. No surprise there. But we had the support of the public. The public wanted us to do this, the scientists wanted us to do this, and when the Congress and private organizations see the report that says, this is the coolest thing, we want you to do this, it's not so hard to organize if everybody's already agreed that this is the most important thing to do. So we do that process in astronomy, and quite a lot of other subjects have them too. I'm not up to date about what we do for agriculture and food, but if we don't have it, we should have it.
And Marty, I'll confess that I got addicted to one of the lectures that I saw you give online. The lecture had a wonderful title. It was called Failed and Useless.
The story of my life.
Yes. And Marty did something that I would not dare to do, which was on a big slide, I think bigger than this, you showed a copy of your report card from some year in school.
It was my college transcript.
Yes. Saying that it might not have been predictable that you would have gotten a Nobel Prize. Is that more or less it?
Especially my chemistry grades, yes.
Yeah.
So,
And I wrote down a quote from your lecture. It was, I didn't overcome failure, I succumbed to it completely. So you must know something about persistence.
no, I quit. I think I'm going to answer this in a sort of a strange way. One of the things we say to talented undergraduates, talented high school students, that we get excited about, is we say to them, follow your passion. Now, if anyone said that to me when I was a college student, I would do what every college student I've ever seen after this has been said to them, look, they have the look of panic. They are scared out of their mind because their immediate question, my immediate question would be, tell me what my passion is. I will do it, but I don't know what it is, and I'm really not sure, but I don't want to fail, and if I don't follow my passion, then I'm a failure. I think that phrase is a horrible phrase because it says to them, make this decision, do it, do this stuff. It shouldn't be that phrase. The phrase should be passionate. Be excited about whatever you're doing. It's going to change every year. It's going to change every time you do things. It's going to be changed. So be passionate, but don't follow your passion. I mean, if you're excited about something, that's wonderful. But get excited about all sorts of things. And I want to use that to jump off and make a suggestion. And this comes from my profound ignorance of all the topics that are being talked about here. I come from a genetic molecular biology background, and I teach in a biology department. We do not talk in our introductory biology course about anything related to food security. We don't talk about this at all. And so I'm going to project and say that this is something that may not be in other places. As an analogy, you mentioned I'm the chair of the Committee on Human Rights. We have been, over the years, wondering about how can we put into the undergraduate, the normal, and the engineering undergraduate curriculum, where can we put examples from human rights of where science and engineering have been used for human rights? I would like to see much more the questions about food. We use lots of examples from medicine. But as far as I know, in the introductory biology course, where it would really help, we do not, I don't believe we talk about stunting and about what the consequences are and what the fundamental biology is behind that. So as one sort of approach, because I think it will get more people interested in the problem, at least know about the problem, is to think about how we can add this, not to agriculture schools, not to agriculture programs, but to basic biology programs, basic chemistry programs, basic science programs in colleges and universities all over, not only the country, but the world. How can we add to those curricula to bring up these really important issues that, for myself, I didn't know about until I started being invited to hear people. And I think that would be very important because we need everybody's input for this.
I hope that you in the audience are picking up on a couple of themes here. And one is that big world-changing research, such as the people on stage have engaged in, is not that far removed from the everyday problems that we have, and that indeed we can't get at those everyday problems unless we do make commitments to some of this larger research. Gebisa, we've known each other for years. I've visited the country where you were born many times. Remarkable country. You're an immigrant to this country, to the United States, and I think sometimes people who come to the United States, as you have, see us in a way that we have a hard time seeing ourselves. And you see what our values are and you contrast those with what you know. Can you just say a word about where this type of work fits into American values as you see it?
I'm not sure I get it. Help me a little bit.
Well, I think that what I've heard you talk about
Yeah.
before is growing up in a small village in Ethiopia.
Sure.
And the kinds of opportunities that this country gave you. Yeah. And that's a personal story. Yeah. It's quite a moving one, frankly. But I don't think that this country gave you those opportunities because it plucked you out of that village and said, Gebisa's a good guy, we want to do a favor. There was a larger expression of American values in helping you with education and supporting your scientific work, which was, by the way, on a crop which, while grown in the United States, we grew it on my family farm in Tennessee when I was growing up, is largely certainly a really important African crop, sorghum. There were motivations of this country in establishing that type of a system. I think it's reflective of American values, old-fashioned values perhaps, but that's what I was hoping you might reflect on for a second.
Mine, goes through the schools that I attended. I'm trying to tell people to imagine what that change was to me. I was raised by a single mother in a small rural village in Ethiopia and walked 20 kilometers to go to school because the nearest elementary school I could attend was that far. And so that reflects the modesty of the background from where I come. And so when I received, in those days, when you reach an 8th grade, there were only 4 boarding schools in the country. So you get to choose, if you score high, you get to attend one of those schools. And so just luckily, I chose one of those agricultural high schools. Okay? And there were 2 agricultural schools. One of them was this one that was run by the American government, the .4 program in the Oklahoma State. And so I dramatized my feeling by saying this. One night, I was sleeping on a dirt floor on a mat in my mother's hut. The next day, I had an opportunity to go to study at high school 300 kilometers away from home. And that was built by an American school, by Americans. And so instead of sleeping on the floor, all of a sudden the next night, I was sleeping on a bed with a clean white sheet and a blanket to put up on top. And it is just like lifting a poor peasant kid from Ethiopia and bringing him to the United States overnight. And those are the kind of dramatic change in my life. But then I get this, I have come to this country and appreciate what liberal arts education is, and I try to provide to my kids that. But I went to a technical school. But the education I get was very rich. And all of a sudden, I'm attending this high school. Most of my professors, teachers are Americans. And we live like Americans in a village isolated from everyone else. And then the values they're beginning to instill in us are values these foreigners had come to the country and teaching us. But this is a value of building passionate and being passionate for science. And so, yes, it was not, it was high school, but still I'm getting that. And I'm also getting the sense of purpose that comes with it. That education is not just a license out of poverty for me, but also a value system that they came up with. Similar to what you did in the United States. We had 4-H, we had FFA, and so we used to save from our pocket allowances. And those students that studied there, we made clubs for photography, clubs for different activities and so on. But yet we also had the FFA program, and so we called them FFE, for Future Farmers of Ethiopia. And so what we did with that was we would go every other weekend. We will go to the rural areas and work with farmers, organizing their kids to be interested in gardening. And the whole sense is that you get an education to provide service, to give back to society. Those are the values that are being instilled in us. And so what I was talking about, America giving the best of what it has, is I look back and look at what the land-grant universities have done to this country. And then the values that you had at that time, not only to build businesses to help your family, but also how communities develop and private sectors emerge in the communities. And those private sectors, small companies, they knew earlier on if they did well, the community would do well, and vice versa. So that relationship was built. And so this sense of purpose that was built in the system that you have and building communities and so on, it went through incredibly well as a partnership between land-grant universities and the private sector. The best public-private partnership that I've ever seen in my life was what the land-grant universities have built up with seed companies in this country. Because that relationship meant that they all work together to build communities, and growth and so on was really to build communities. Today, our companies are huge, and we're investing in them. Because they're big, they need more resources to be invested in them. But yet, their communities are moved away. The world has become their communities, and there is no loyalty to any community as long as you make your money. That traditional American value is being lost even in this country. And so that's the community that I value, are the ones that really, truly mean to building humanity, building capacity to help yourself, to help your community, to make your country grow. And that is what America shared with the rest of the world, in my view.
What you can't see in the audience is that I have a countdown clock in front of me. So I'm going to have to manage time really well here. And what I want to do is Gebisa, you just gave, whether you realized it or not, an eloquent closing statement. But I want to give each of the others of you a chance, and maybe just 1 minute, if you can, to offer any other reflections, closing comments that you might, and then I have a couple of closing comments of my own. So maybe, John, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'd say we think directly about agriculture here and food, but our research enterprise is very wide, and the consequences of discovering something in physics or chemistry can suddenly reach into another area. Who'd have thought that ultra-precise clocks would lead to the GPS system, where you have a chip in your telephone that tells you where you are, and our entire commercial world runs on it. And who'd have thought that that was because we thought we had to fight a war, that the government invested in that technology, and they thought it would take a whole backpack full of electronics to do this, what's now on a tiny chip. So now we drive our tractors with GPS-controlled directions, and we have built systems around things that you would never guess. So we can't turn back that kind of technology, but we do need to be ready for it. So simultaneously, I think we should be thrilled that we're developing new things and cautious to see what we do with them, because once in a while they get us into trouble. So we need science both to create and to detect trouble. So we have it, and we have to keep on going with it. But I'm also so impressed with what we've accomplished in the short time we've been here on Earth. It's not so long ago that human beings had rocks for tools, and that was it. And we were a food group. So we've done a lot.
It's hard to beat, Marty.
I can't beat that. No, I'm going to agree. I think that there's a lot more to understand. There's a lot more to discover. I think we have to attack any problem at all sorts of different levels. And the more people we can bring into this, the more people that can discuss it, the better it is. And to be aware of the surprises that are going to come. Enrico Fermi is known for having said something on the order of, if you do an experiment and it confirms your hypothesis, and what you've hypothesized, then you've done a measurement. When you do an experiment and it doesn't confirm your hypothesis, then you've made a discovery. You got to do a lot of experiments to do those discoveries, but that, I think, is the important thing. I think we have to look in every imaginable direction, and some we haven't even yet discovered we have to look at, that will, in total, bring this there. But to reiterate one other point that I made, I think we need to be telling more people about this story. I must admit that it was only last August when I happened to have the privilege of going to Timor-Leste that I even heard the word stunting and learned about that worldwide situation. And if I didn't know it, who else would know it? But more, there is a wealth of information out there, a wealth of problems that we really should be communicating with everyone about. Because the more input we can get, the more output we're going to get.
Thanks. Cynthia, any quick closing thoughts?
Very quickly, as we go to the moonshot research for agriculture, we need to take the changing environment into account in everything we do. It's no longer stationary, it's dynamic. We can't forget that. We need to make models of everything. I'm a modeler. And the models are tools for change, so we can understand the changing climate conditions and make projections into the future. Without models, actually, you can't do that. And finally, as Secretary Vilsack said, always remember the farmers and always remember the people who are eating the food, which is everybody on the planet.
Thanks,
Cary.
Cynthia. Thanks.
Thanks.
So I'm not going to try to summarize this discussion, but I'll offer just a few closing thoughts. I think it was President Eisenhower, actually, who said that not all urgent problems are important, and not all important problems are urgent. What more than 150 Nobel and World Food Prize laureates are saying is that the problem that we've been discussing today is both urgent and important. Now, you know, the proverbial man on the street might say, well, they'll come up with something, they always do. But the they, interestingly enough, usually refers to researchers and scientists. In this field, in our field, Norman Borlaug famously in 1970, when he accepted a Nobel Peace Prize, said that the Green Revolution would buy us 30 years of time in terms of food production. Well, that's 55 years ago. And we've yet to commit to anything quite so aspirational as he was working on. So implicitly, I think what we have today is actually a big, huge opportunity. It's an opportunity in terms of humanitarian terms, in terms of national security, and frankly, as you're going to find out from the next panel, it's an opportunity in hard-nosed economic terms. So my conclusion is we need to be acting as if we believe our own research about food security and climate and soil and water and other trends. We obviously need to be thinking outside the box. That's uncomfortable to do, but it's what we need to be doing. The question for all of us in this room is, well, what's next? Obviously, those of us on stage and the World Food Prize Foundation are going to continue to try to spread the message that we need to be acting in big, bold, aspirational ways, and that solutions are possible. We can do this. The second is, I think there's a role for our professional societies, for the different crop societies, for the AAAS, for the National Academy of Sciences, for the crop, soil, and agronomy societies, for all the different professional societies to begin to look at this issue, think long-term, as in 25 years, which doesn't seem that long away, and begin also to highlight this issue and begin to think about a process for taking the large number of possible moonshots that we've got and narrowing it down to some of the best bets. And finally, I really do think that there's something for every one of you to do. I can't tell you what that is, but I think if you think carefully about it, you will figure out a way to promote this issue, promote the work on it, spread the news, and be a change agent. So thank you very much, and let me just ask you to give a big round of applause to an incredible panel.